Good evening. Welcome to IKYA Live, world news from the spiritual perspective and your premier news program for practical spiritual advice for your everyday life. My name is Andy, and I have had a laser treatment on my face today, in case you're wondering why I look the same color as my shirt. I am operations manager here at IKYA Center in Oslo, Norway, and we are very honored to have you with us tonight. Before we get started, right away down below, like tonight's episode and share with fellow spiritual seekers, because they can join all evening while we are live or follow along later on. Also, like and subscribe to us here on YouTube and Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, ikya.official. So, IKYA Live is a conversation. It's a discussion. It's not just a news reporting program. It's really about taking a news topic of the day and unpacking it, looking at the spiritual principles at play, and then spiritual teacher IKYA assists us in lifting our consciousness around that topic. Today's topic is a really interesting and good one. It's about change makers, and we particularly highlighted Taylor Swift, but throughout human history, you probably could fit the number of people who have made their mark on human history on one cruise ship. We know names like Da Vinci, Galileo, Mozart, Bach, artists, historians, you've got scientists, you've got Marie Curie, you've got Jane Goodall, you've got Martin Luther King Jr., so you have people in politics, and in all the different areas of human life, we do have people who make their mark in the world, but it's very few, and there is always that lingering question, what do these people have in common? What makes them stand out among all the billions of people who have incarnated on this planet? And do I have it? Do you have it? What do we have? What's needed? Is it possible, especially in a day like today where the world feels increasingly chaotic and out of control? I think a lot of us do ask the question, what I do as an individual, does it really matter? Can it matter? Can I make a difference? So that's really what we're digging into tonight, and we're going to just turn it over to IKYA, and remember that IKYA Live is a conversation, so write in your comments and questions down below. We'll feed them in, and we have a studio audience as well. So let's really dig in and make tonight a fun and interesting exploration. And on to IKYA.
Yeah, this is a really interesting topic, I think, because as Andy said, there are not that many people who have actively changed the world. And why is that? What's so special about them? And how can we become like them? And first of all, when someone changes the world, doesn't mean that he or she necessarily are good people. Genghis Khan, for instance, he was responsible for killing about 10% of the world's population at that point, which is quite impressive, right? And he was acting in other ways too. There are more than 16 million people that are direct descendants of him. So he is active in the bedroom and in the world. So there are plenty of evil people. We know Hitler, all of these characters. So being part of changing the world does not necessarily always reflect a good heart and a good intention. Often it is the worst of humans that end up influencing humans the most, unfortunately. And I think where we are at today, we all need to look at ourselves in the mirror and ask, what can we do? Right? Because it is so simple and easy today to become indifferent. We've become desensitized in many ways to everything that's happening. Look at politics, the environment, everything that's going on. And we feel that this is too much, and then we just we don't want to deal with it. And we become indifferent. And that is dangerous, because when we become indifferent, we just let things go on, and we're not taking part in pulling the world forward. And to me, part of lifting our consciousness when we are in an active spiritual awareness, or where we try to be, we have increased responsibilities. We're supposed to show the way. We're supposed to be leading and living examples of how humans should be if humans were better, right? But are we? And this is what I'd like to explore with you, right? And for all of you to think, what can we actually do? Because I think we can all recognize that we have all imploded a little bit, right? And it happens because we're not sure what to do, and the world is so overwhelming. So, of course, I've made a list of things you can do. We'll get back to that. But we'll try to also pull apart a little bit what is it about these people, and what is it about us, right? And how can we up our game and get back on the horse and be ambitious when it comes to changing the world? The first thing that we need to look at is often when we want to change the world, it's because we see it as being wrong. There is something wrong with it. Right? We don't like something and then we should change things. Those people never end up changing anything. When you look at all the change makers in human history, they've not been addressing what's wrong. They've looked at opportunities. They've seen all the wonderful opportunities and possibilities and moments, and they've grabbed it. They've wanted to do something great, and they've seen this world can offer me everything I need for me to do something great. It's never been about looking at the world through the lens of this is wrong and this is wrong and this is wrong. And most people criticize, right? People who actively change things do not criticize. Criticism is for people who never, ever have the intention of making changes for real, right? Look at critics, in the newspapers, right? They can write a critique of a concert. They don't have any intention of learning how to play themselves, but they love being in the role of telling everyone what's wrong with it. It should have been better, right? The musicians are too busy making music and doing concerts, connecting with their audience and having a wonderful time, right? This is what the change makers do. So, number one, stop criticizing. Because when we criticize, it means it's not my responsibility, someone else should do it. So when you say there is something wrong with the world, someone should do something, right? You do not have the intention to make a change in yourself or in the world. So this is like a very typical example. Look at every person you can possibly think of that's been part of changing the world, right? They have an idea, they have a vision, they want to do something, and they do it, right? Very simple. So we need then to first change our relationship with the world and not see it as a place where there are so many wrong things going on. And it's so overwhelming and we can't do anything about it. We need to, switch this around a little bit. And from a spiritual perspective, what we do is change the starting point. We can lift our consciousness and number one, look at the world as a wonderful place of studies, right? This is a school. We all incarnate to learn and to unfold. And in order to do so, we all need to be confronted with our own karma, which is the distance between our current state of consciousness and what we currently believe and how life actually works. And we all try to figure out how life works and how to adapt to it, which is also the fundamental principle of evolution, right? So we need to see that first. that this planet, this world is wonderful. Therefore, whenever something happens, it's because it's direct product of consciousness, evolution, and the karma of those individuals taking part in whatever is happening. There is nothing wrong with it. But can it be improved? Yes, it can. And can we be part of facilitating a better world? Right? It's just like looking at education in general, right? We can look at education and say, it's a wonderful place. We all need to study. We all need to learn things and skills and science and all that. But it can be improved, right? And this is the attitude we should have as spiritual individuals. Not saying that there is anything wrong with anything, but say, how can I be part of improving the framework? How can we facilitate a better world so that everyone may grow and heal and learn with less suffering, for instance, with less stupidity, with less aggression, all of that. So, criticizing things is a sign that you're not there yet. And when we are indifferent, when you're, nah, I can't deal with that. I've got more than enough with me. The thing is that there is no difference between you and the world because you're part of it. And as I always tell people, you are actively changing the world every moment because you are taking part in what's happening. The thing is, in what way? Another angle is, what I also tell people is you're always an example of something. So what are you an example of? It's that. Often, unfortunately, our brains will have a tendency to cancel everything that we want to forget about ourselves. So, when we think of changing the world, we have a tendency to look at like the good things we can do. I can recycle, right? I can be part of something, I can do something great. But when you're, being in a bad mood, when you're being negative, when you're being aggressive, when you're criticizing, when you make your choices based on destructive thoughts and emotions, you're also changing the world. And remember that most thoughts humans have are negative. Most of your thoughts will be self-criticism. Is that making the world a better place? Or is it making you a worse place to be, and thereby pulling the world down? Most of the things we do as humans pull the world down, are pulling the collective consciousness down. So you are actively taking part in changing the world every moment, with every choice, with every thought, with every emotion, with every intention. But whenever we feel, now I shouldn't really be doing that, we don't pay attention. And we make excuses for ourselves. But once we recycle, we want admiration. Look, I did something good. Because that should matter. When we do something that is uplifting, and it stands out to us, what does that tell us about our general state? Right? It should be the opposite. Then would be a positive force in the world. When you do something negative or you have a negative thought, that stands out to you and you really notice. But for most people, it's when we do something good, have a happy thought, when we do something that truly matters, something with purpose, right? We notice. So we all have a lot of potential for getting better at this. So, Another, rule of thumb is then understand that you're always influencing the world. Always. Every moment. And with every single little thing you do, you have a choice. Do you want to influence the world in a good way? Do you want to influence yourself in a good way? Because you, as a vehicle for life, when you're doing something that will ultimately pull you down, you're poisoning the soup, because you're part of this cosmic soup and we're all here together, and it's more helpful to be uplifting and to want to do good in the world. When we don't want to do good to ourselves, we're definitely part of the problem. And I meet so many spiritual seekers, right? They want to do good in the world. They have all these great thoughts and ideas. And then I look at their lives. I look at how they treat themselves. And they're definitely not someone who's making the world a better place. But they don't want all of that to count. Only that they have these thoughts, I'm meant to do something great, right? I've talked to thousands and thousands and thousands of people. Most of them come to me with this idea that I know I'm incarnated for something great. I'm supposed to do something. And my answer to that is, yes, you have. We all have. We all have greatness in us. We all have the potential of greatness, of impacting the world in a great way. So few people, though, take the consequence of that. And the thing is, for most people, when they have this feeling that I'm meant to do something great, please tell me what it is. I said, no, you don't actually want to do something great. You want admiration. And we think that the maximum amount of admiration will come from us having done something that other people notice. That's the intention. And when we want admiration, it comes from pain, right? It comes from us not having done anything with our talents, with all our different potentials. So by other people admiring us, we can then tell ourselves the story that we've done something important. So we want to skip the hard part, which is actually doing something great, and just go to the part where everybody can admire us, because it's easy to imagine. And of course, we deserve it because we're so special and God loves me, especially, it's that. We're all like that. We're born with that thought. And the thing is, this is how the ego interprets your spiritual purpose. Because you have greatness in you. When we look at all these great people throughout human history, you're just like them. There's nothing special about them. You're just like them. But you haven't figured out how to kind of utilize yourself. And maybe you don't even have any interest. Maybe you're too indifferent. Maybe you don't have that fire. But it means you have not connected to yourself. Because any spiritual seeker will know that once we connect to ourselves truly, the fire will start in our heart. It will start in a sexual center. It will start in our mind. And over time, we will be on fire. We will have passion, and we will bring ourselves to the world. When we kind of look at what we've done today, it's people in general are doing less important things for the world than ever. And it's mainly because of social media, right? Because we can just tell ourselves that we're part of great things because we like something on Facebook, right? So instead of taking responsibility, being a pillar of our communities, we can just criticize something on social media and like, I told them, right? So, and we admire people, we become followers of people who do great things sometimes, or that, you know, they try to influence the world somehow. So we have, in many ways, outsourced our own greatness, right? So we follow a lot of people who have more interesting lives, and then we criticize them for not making enough changes, right? If they do something we do not appreciate, we criticize them, because after all, they represent us. So they should take responsibility, right? They should make the right choices, and we will cancel them and punish them if they don't. So we can continue to live our lives without responsibility, with negative intentions and thoughts and emotions, and live through the fantasy of taking part in other people's lives. Well, at the same time, we have less impact for real. Our lives are becoming more destructive because when we look at people who do greater things, we feel like we were part of it, so we don't have to. You don't follow people who do negative things. Why? Because that's your job, right? That's what we are left with. So, when you look at the whole social media game, people are aggressive, they attack, they criticize this or that. And it's garbage. We need to get back to a mindset where we take responsibility, where we see the opportunities and where we want to actively change the world, not the world to be changed. There's a distinction, right? What most people think of when they want the world to change. Also, when you look at social media, just try now to look at the mindset of people. It's mostly, again, that we would like to be exactly how we are, but we are not compatible with the world because we're full of shit. We're full of our own karma and we're dysfunctional. So, to be in harmony, we want the world to change so that we can continue, because we are perfect the way we are. We're a 10 out of 10, right? Because we have confidence and self-love. So we think that the world should change so we don't have to, because why should we? And this is what we can see in many people's different ways of communicating. This is the attitude. The world should change, not me. Those people never change the world. But this is where people are at for the most part. And this is also what we need to grow out of. Especially if you notice these types of patterns in yourself, just understand that you've been brainwashed, right? And it's time to unwash your brain and become more alive again and understand how we can actually get to that point where we can change the world for real. So people who change the world, they do the opposite. They always take full responsibility for themselves. And they first transform themselves. So we have to do the work. We have to change. We have to prove that our changes work, that we become more compatible with the world, that we become more productive, that we become a better person. This is what people also figure out when they have passion, when they have purpose. They do something and they feel more alive. They feel they're growing and healing, right? They transform themselves first. They never think, I should be the same and the world should change so that the world can accommodate me. They see that, oh, right, the world works the way it does. If I want to achieve greatness, I need to transform. I need to adapt. I need to get better at this. It's the opposite attitude. We had a question?
Yeah, our colleague Aki here, he makes a really interesting observation that I hadn't thought of, that, you know, we have a tendency to bond much more strongly with each other and feel a sense of community around negativity and criticism, or especially focused on problems. And it's very difficult to bond with others when we're looking for solutions, or we've found a solution we're trying to rally around. I mean, Taylor Swift is actually, back to the Swifties, I mean, she's a great example of someone who, if she's ever gotten any real criticism, it's when she's too positive or she's too good and, you know, people want to tear her down and that kind of thing. So what is that mechanism? Why is it we are so easily, you know, bound together and unified when it's negative, and we really couldn't care less if it were positive?
Very simple. Winners go alone. If you want to climb a mountain and you believe that I can do it, you will feel that anyone else will pull you down. You want to rely on your own strength because you're also testing your own boundaries. You're testing yourself. You want to know what's inside of you. And basically your mind says, I work alone. In the other end, losers unite because it's safety and strength in numbers. When you do not have that sense of direction, remember that people want to achieve great things. In their genetics, they have a stronger sense of competition. Sometimes they're just competing with themselves, but they're competing. So they do not necessarily want to work with others because they want to do it their way. Right? And that's fine. So if you take that as one extreme, and the opposite, which is then people not really doing anything, it's easier then to criticize and to feel neglected and victimized and all of that. And then you can support each other, because when you do, you create a codependency that can help you survive. These are just different survival strategies based on your level of winning, basically. So if you're at the kind of bottom level, you will always need others to survive because you've proven to yourself, I'm not a winner. I can't compete. So I need to kind of like work with others to see if we can, you know, figure out what to do and how we can survive together. And when we talk negatively about someone, it unites people. Just like in a country, right? As we've seen throughout history, if a ruler is getting less popular, the go-to is, let's start a war. Because once we have a common enemy, people will unite. So the safest way of bonding with someone else, if they're two people, the best way is to criticize a third person and talk about their experiences, the terrible experience with that person. That will bond them because they're sharing an experience where they're not competing. And that's the point. Because when they're pointing to someone else and criticizing, they are not competing, right? It's basically a subtle signal telling that we can be on the same team because we have a common enemy. It works, right? So throughout human evolution, coming together over enemies, it's been a thing. It's how humans have survived. It can even be nature. It can be famine. It can be anything. But once you have to find an enemy, it's important that we come together. So when we started developing civilizations and social intelligence, we turned that into being against someone. And it's very easy, of course, to criticize someone who has achieved something that we have not. Because then we can also tell ourselves that, you know, it's unfair. It's just luck, and I've got a lot of bad luck. It wasn't me. And the other person will say, yeah, sure, you know, I agree with you totally. because then they can share that experience and that sense of reality. So when you know you're full of bullshit, when you know you've made up a story, when you can share that with someone and that person will support it, all of a sudden it becomes true to you. Because your brain operates on kind of spaces and kind of social sharing. So once you communicate with someone believing the same things you do, it's not just a common enemy thing. It's like we are existing in the same space. That will trigger a whole lot of different chemicals in your brain and different types of bonding at the same time. Because as I've explained before, in an evolutionary hierarchy, the top point is the individual who decides what the truth is. This is why kings and sorcerers and medicine people, priests, they've always had the power to decide what truth is, right? So once you can bond with someone and you've made something up and you know it's bullshit, but the moment you both believe it, it's the truth, and then you're on top of the hierarchy. You're better than anyone because you know what the truth is. So it's a way to survive, right? And it's definitely not changing the world. It's doing the opposite. And this is what we need to learn because we live in a very strange part of human history at the moment, right? And there are so many mechanisms that can numb us and lower our consciousness. And this is part of what we're trying to do with this format, is to assist you to kind of snap out of it and relearn how to connect to yourself and how to make a difference in the world.
What about the exceptions that, like, for example, Jesus Christ is a woven together sort of fantasy person based on maybe a real person, but then a lot, so that's kind of a similar thing, and it was also about power and things, and some of the, maybe Muhammad or Buddha were similar. Like, how is that different than the mechanism you just described?
It's not different. The interesting thing when it comes to human survival, now, reality will not make people bond. Only when you have alternative facts. Remember, religions are basically conspiracy theories, right? That's what they are. So, when you have the real truth, believing becomes the truth. And that will trigger a lot more chemicals than reality, because reality is boring. It doesn't do anything because we're all in it. So once you can have a special version of it, it's like, yeah, we see things the same, which means we're on the same team and we have decided what truth is, so we're on top, really. And it's very good for the ego, right? So this is also why we see that religious people, they're also the conspiracy nuts. They're gullible. They will believe anything because the whole point in religion is to believe without evidence. Reality is evidence without belief. That's boring. It doesn't do anything. It does not trigger our chemicals. It does not trigger any bonding or feeling special, right? So whenever we up it a bit and we just tweak reality and we create a different story and we make other people believe and we share it, ooh, we're on the same page and we know we can trust each other, right? Because that reality, that space can only exist for as long as we have common affirmation. So when we're sharing that sense of reality and those beliefs, that space will exist and we will exist in it. And that sharing does something to us, right? So this is basically what religion is. But it's also, again, why religious people are willing to believe absolutely anything. And the brainwashing part of it is that the whole point of religion is to prove that you can believe and treat something as true without any shred of evidence. That's the whole point. If there is evidence, you don't have to believe, do you? So you're of a pure heart and an extra devoted religious person if you can believe the wildest stories without any belief and shape your life around it. Right? That's how you affirm that you are a good religious person. So then you're already programmed to be willing to believe anything, especially if there is no evidence. Right? Because evidence will not trigger the same sense of emotions and thoughts. So what we've seen, for instance, the world of politics today is the exact same thing, because rational people can ask themselves, how can people possibly believe this? Well, it's because of this mechanism. They are better Christians if they believe without evidence and facts. So they can believe the wildest things as true, and it becomes part of the religious practice to demonstrate that you're willing to treat something as truth without any evidence, because you don't need it, because Jesus told you, right? So there's never been any real interest in finding evidence when it comes to religion, for instance. It's more a matter of finding confirmation for the beliefs. So, but we are like this as humans. It's how we also, back in the day, a few 100,000 years ago, when humans started, what held a group together would be common beliefs, right? These are our ancestors. This is the, spirit individuals of nature that relate only to us because we're special. And then humans started to invent gods, different gods, for the purpose of giving them strengths and victories in war, like killing the enemies, but also to give them food, give them more food. It's smart, because when you create all these beings and their purpose is for you to survive, you will feel that you're on the winning team and you will work harder, right? So if you know that your forest being has provided for you, you will go out there and you will, force your little heart out. You will find things to eat because you know you've been provided for. It's that. It's always been like that. So belief has been an important part of how humans have survived. But this is the opposite of changing the world. This is for people who are not changing them. We need to go to the opposite mindset if we want to have an impact. Yeah.
We have a question from the audience.
Yes. I experienced that we're talking a lot about different mechanisms that are in our genes and our biology connected to survival. And also, as I experiencing working with you is a lot about going beyond it. And I will say for myself, been working with you for so many years, and still I experience that this is kind of the work in a way to let's say continuously, like a work and a training, connecting to what we more are as essence, as spirits outside our bodies, and study like how can we dissolve those programs that are in our bodies and start to take more like control in a way from who we truly are. And I experience this as like a really hard work, like every day. And are there any other ways to do this, or is this kind of the way you do it?
There is no one way to do anything. My approach is that when we look at evolution, because when we look at how evolution and nature works, we can learn so much. How evolution works is through random mutation, and then something works and we adapt, and it's the same thing spiritually. We figure out how things work for real by simply testing out a lot of things. And most of it will not work, but then something will. And then it will work because you've tested it out. It's not an affirmation of belief. Someone telling you this is working, and unless it's working for you, you're possessed by the devil, of course it will work then, right? If it's like, whatever, test out how nature works, how you work in nature, you will figure out what works for you. So then you build your skills, you build intelligence. And when it comes to going past the level of survival, yeah, it's just pounding away at it and always kind of discovering the illusions of the human mind and the human culture and our DNA, and finding these kind of pathways, as we can do, for instance, in meditation or spiritual practices. But they're both similar for each and every one of us, but they're also unique. And this is back to people who are changing the world. They have found something unique in themselves, right? They're not trying to copy. And this is it. When you look at, Taylor Swift, for instance, anyone can buy a microphone and a guitar and a blonde wig. It doesn't turn them into Taylor Swift. There's only one Taylor Swift. And this is the difference, right? That once we connect to ourselves, we become original. When you look at all individuals who really influenced human history, they're all characters, right? They stand out as originals. They're not bland. They are themselves. They have connected to something inside of them, and it makes them stand out. They're quite unique in character, personality, how they live their lives, what they achieve. It's that, right? So we need to be original. As long as we copy, we will not change the world. And spiritually, this is also what we're trying to achieve, because it's that journey, peeling away everything that you have copied. I've explained this as, in the beginning, just like a child, we need to be trained, we need to be molded, we need to be shaped, because we don't understand how to survive in the world. So as children, we will be influenced, and we will copy our parents, we will copy everyone, because that's how we learn how to be here and be a hopefully decent human being. And then we grow up, and then we have to find our own path, our own way. And then we have to go to a psychiatrist to basically peel away what we learned from our parents, right? So it's that. First, we are shaped and molded, so we are able to function. Then we have to unlearn, right? Then we have to find our own path, our own way in life. And spiritually, this is what we're doing. Whenever we are in earlier kind of stages of our spiritual development, we will learn by copying. We will have to copy, and we know this is not me. Life is not me. The world is not me. It's not the world that is a problem. It's the fact that you are copying it instead of bringing something original in. Right? So whenever you feel that the world is a little too tight, the world is stopping you, the world is limiting you, it feels, I don't want to be here. It's because you're copying the world. Right? And then, it's not your world then. Because you are not you. You have not connected to your true essence. We learn over time to peel that away. That's one part of the job. The other job is connecting to what we are spiritually, so that we stop copying. And that's the kind of like unlearning part, the unmolding part, where we start to recognize, that part, okay, that's not me, this is not me, this is not me. But you've already learned how to function, not just on this planet, but in many different dimensions, many different lifetimes. So now it's time for you to learn how to be you in the world, right? So when that journey begins, you start peeling away and you become more and more of an original. Spiritually, this is what we're drawn to in all of these people, because we recognize they have connected to something in themselves that are unique and original, right? And most of these people throughout history, like, they're so recognizable. You can just like hear their name or see their photo, like there's something about them, they're so recognizable. And it's that. And then, of course, as we do, we're drawn to their authenticity, and then we try to copy them, as one does, right? And that doesn't work either. But it's that we know there is something unique there. But because we haven't found it in ourselves, we see them as mirrors. We see them as Greek gods. In the way they carry some of the qualities that we want to develop in ourselves, we can kind of recognize there is something here. This person, I feel for this person, which means there is something in that individual that correlates with your own vibration. But it's still not you. Right? And all these great people, normally, they've had a way of being able to communicate in a way that triggers emotions. So they're able to move people. Right? When they do what they do, people get triggered and they want to be part of this. Right? Look at a character like Hitler, for instance. Right? He was really good at that. He spent hours and hours and hours and hours in front of the mirror practicing his gestures and, you know, all of that. And it totally worked. Right? People were invigorated because he was communicating in a very emotional way. Like Trump is very much the same, that he's able to trigger people emotionally. Like, you know, what he says is not important, it's how he delivers it, like how he represents the feelings and emotions of people, and how people then connect with that. Taylor Swift, same thing. She connects with people's emotions, and the way she performs and everything she does then activates people's emotions so they feel that she represents them, right? But she's the original. People are copying. Right? So this is a major difference between the people who actually change the world and the people who want to but never end up doing anything. So we're all on that journey to peel away whatever is not authentic. Right? You can only change the world with what is authentic in you. Right? So that connection is where it all starts. Because then what you do is relatable. It's something that other people then can use as a mirror to be inspired. And it's that. So do everything you can in your life to peel away what is not authentic. You have it in you. You're not just 1 in a million or 1 in a billion, you're 1 in a trillion. You are absolutely unique. But your life is mostly what you have learned or what you have copied. And that is where the pain comes from. That is why the world feels off to you. You are off. When you begin to live from the authentic being, the world will receive. And you will have all the freedom and the freedom of expression, because then you're not copying anymore. You are free. The world will never stop you because existence wants you to unlock your true essence. And then it will flow. The world has no need for you trying to be someone you're not or copying someone else. The world cannot use that. So then you feel limited. It's life showing you that now you're not connected yet. Sorry, we don't need this. Why should we have you in a blonde wig and a microphone when we have Taylor Swift? That's basically what life is saying. So become an original. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've got a question in the audience.
I'm just curious because some of these big personalities, it's like they found their their path or whatever very early in life, like Mozart, for example. And I'm sure Taylor Swift as well started fairly early. And then some of us find it perhaps later. And my first question is, what's kind of the reason for that? And the second, I guess, is I can speak for my own journey, but I feel that the reason that I've started to find my path is because of all this peeling that Maria has talked about. And my experience is also once the peeling begins and I feel more and more that I'm connecting to the authentic part, it's starting to reach a sort of a level where I can myself not stop it, and the flow just becomes very strong, and it's more painful to resist and all of these things you're also talking about. If you'd like to elaborate on that.
No, I think, our evolution spiritually is not connected to how we incarnate, because that's a whole different thing, right? So you incarnate with the exact point of evolution and consciousness that you are. It means some individuals, they will incarnate being more aware of themselves, with skills, with levels of intelligence, because that's where they are. And other people incarnate in other points of evolution because that's where they are. So many of these people, if it's in their path that they are supposed to influence the world, they have to start early. So it will be there. Like Mozart is an excellent example, because as I said before, it's interesting when you look at Mozart, you can hear Mozart from the things he wrote as a child. He had this very kind of distinct kind of sound to him, and that never changed, right? So he was kind of fully formed just in a child's brain, right? So this is how consciousness works. You will incarnate based on your exact point of evolution. But this process is still in all of us, right? And this is what these people can remind us of, is how to become more authentic. Like also what you talk about when the flow is coming through, that's just the first part of it, because the question we then need to ask ourselves, how will I change the world with this? Because it's not about you at all, right? Your essence is part of the universe, and you are it, but you're also the vehicle. So once we have more flow, we need to make it available. And it's not just making it available, but we are our own managers. We have to manage and distribute and apply what we are. It's not for the universe to do so. And this is also a big misunderstanding in a lot of human spiritual traditions. Is I have my flow and I just hand it over. I'm available. And that does not amount to anything, because you are the one having to learn how to apply yourself to the universe in a productive way. This is part of true expansion. As I've said many times, at some point your spiritual expansion can only happen based on how much expansion you're able to produce in the world around you. It's not about you anymore. It's how you're able to apply your essence and your flow productively. That is the only thing that will expand you. This is why impacting and changing the world is also spiritually relevant. It's not like this is not my thing, it is your thing. Because you incarnate in an ever unfolding universe and you're part of it. And your expansion is how much of existence you are able to balance and heal and promote and stimulate at the same time. Because that's what your flow is for. Otherwise, it's just flowing through and then nothing, right? It's a waste of resources. So that is also what we need to learn. So looking at all of these people who have impacted the world, we should try to do the same, but in our own way. Our presence should make lasting impact. why else do we exist, right? Then it would just be for ourselves and our ego, and that's not it. Everything that you experience in the world, the worlds and different dimensions and levels, is the result of what has been released through the flow of other individuals. Everything in existence, it's all the result of what has been channeled by others, right? That's the world you exist in. That can enable you to go through whatever you need to go through, to be mirrored, to have these copied experiences until you're able to connect with yourself, and then it's your turn.
So on YouTube, Shailesh makes a really sort of classic observation, especially in modern spirituality, that it seems that as we become more aware, often our desire to achieve melts away. So the question then is, should we set specific goals for sort of contributing externally to the world around us, or one does things that are needed, and how do we recognize what is really needed?
Yeah. It's a principle that we should always give what's needed, not what we have. Because what you have belongs to you. That will carry kind of your vibration. For it to be something that is compatible and useful to the world, you may need to change it. So we learn to give what's needed. Now, you're absolutely right. Often when we begin our work on a spiritual path, when we begin the process of awakening, we lose a lot of our ambition. And often we really don't want to achieve things. And the reason is that we're starting to balance ourselves, heal ourselves. All ambition comes from pain normally, in a lower level of consciousness, when it's connected to survival, right? Understand that your brain only cares about survival, right? That's what it's about. And then we have all these goals and plans and wants to compensate for whatever we feel that we don't have. All our wounds, all our memories, all of that, we try to compensate by balancing it out through ambition. And so whenever we want to achieve something, it's about how it will make us feel and what story we can tell about ourselves to correct the story we carry within. It's all of that. So when we begin to expand spiritually, that will melt away. Because we realize, oh, that's just nothing. We move into states where we're balanced, where there's nothing to do. And then we realize, oh, everything I ever wanted to achieve was for the ego. It was just to satisfy my own hunger based on my own kind of black holes. It was never about anything else. It was just my survival, my ego, my needs. And when that melts away, the brain doesn't know what to do anymore. No ambition, no nothing, because that's what it's hardwired to do. It's not hardwired to be in service at all. So that's the tricky part. Because we go through this phase where we feel I can just sit in meditation, I don't want to do anything, I'll have a cup of tea and just like watch the world go by and I'll be happy. And sure, but that's still the ego. Because you're not in a state of purpose, which means the ego is satisfied, right? And that creates the sense that I have no need to achieve anything. Yeah, you're still in the ego. If you were in a higher consciousness, the opposite would happen. I'm finally free. Now life can flow through me and I can do everything. I can be everywhere. And I want my flow and what I am to co-create with absolutely everything in the universe. That is what happens when you begin the spiritual expansion for real. And you will watch your ego being a little speck of dust. And say, well, that's when I want to experience through that perspective. But now the real journey begins. Is how much can I create with this? How much can I do? So you're filled with an ambition that is not connected to you at all. And this is the tipping point that I said, that I explained, that our expansion will only happen when we create expansion in the world around us, not in us. Because the ego will lose interest and ambition. Because that is filled. Right? But this is also the proof of the pudding in the way, because it will show us where we are. When we are in the state of the ego, we just feel like we don't want to do anything, and we can just become very, very passive. And you've seen this. If you look at India as a country, this is what happened, right? You meditate, you're so balanced, and you don't have a productive life, right? India is changing. But when you look at it, you know, there was a lot of that going on. So, the ego does not understand service. So why would you want to do something for the world when you don't feel like it? You don't feel like anything anymore, right? You need to raise your awareness even more. And over time, then you get to this point where it starts to wake up in you. It's not you becoming awake, it is becoming awake in you. And you will be drawn to doing things and create things, and you can see that your life is not yours anymore. Things are happening. Life is moving you around. You are given instructions. You're taking part in things that it has nothing for you. You're doing it because life wants to apply what you are in a specific way. And that will gradually take over. And whenever that kind of point of co-creation happens, where the actual kind of blending of chemicals, creating something new, when that happens, you will be filled with excitement and love and passion and all of that, which is so much stronger than what you can possibly feel in your ego. But it's got nothing to do with you, right? I've compared it to, you know, if you have a lovely garden and you've spent hours and hours and months trying to grow a beautiful, you know, rose bush or something, right? And then it blooms, right? And it's just everything, right? You get all these feelings and it's so wonderful, but it's still not you, right? And you just feel so lucky to be able to take part in this experience because you didn't do it, you facilitate it. But that experience is everything. And it's kind of like that, right? So how you apply yourself to the world becomes the spiritual journey. So most individuals, they do the first part, right? They're able to get past the ego, and then they go to that in-between space. And then they, oh, this is nothingness. Okay, job well done, the end. And they just stay there. And over time, they figure it out. Some people can stay there for like thousands and thousands of years, like good luck to them. But I try also to guide individuals past that point because the real journey starts on the other side of it, right? And this is also what we today need to become more aware of. If you have the sense that you are connected, you have responsibility to bring it to the world. Because we need to uplift this planet, and we need to do it now. Right? We don't have the luxury of being passive. Then you're actually part of the problem. We need to co-create. We need to bring in our flow and vibration, and it doesn't help if it's just like flowing through you. That's basically like flooding the streets with milk. It can't be used by anyone. Right? You have to turn it into products, you know, butter and cheese and cakes and cream, whatever. Then people can use it. That's your job. So it's learning how to be productive with what we are spiritually in this world. That is what will lift the consciousness on this planet. That is what will point kind of the path forward.
Yes, we have a question in the audience.
Hi. We would like to have some more money to play around with. And my friend besides me, I think, is on to something. He started trading a couple of months ago, and I think it's really good. And yeah, I would like to hear a couple of words of your opinion of what we are doing here. Are we on to something, or are we maybe scammed, or I don't know.
I think when it comes to all kind of strategies of achieving something, no matter what it is mostly about the learning process, right? We do not take anything with us when we leave this lifetime. The rest is just Play-Doh, right? We're just experimenting, trying to learn about ourselves and who we are and how to achieve things. And there are many different ways to do that. And so you're asking the question from a place of wanting to control the outcome of your experiments. Then it's not an experiment. Then it's an execution of something you already understand. So life is not like that. We need to experiment and we need to figure things out. And whatever happens will always be in line with what we need to learn. Right? So we also need to let go of the fantasy that life should be safe or predictable, because then we're just copying. Sometimes we're even copying ourselves, right? So doing things we haven't done before, entering new territories, that's valuable in and of itself. When it comes to the whole thing about kind of repetition, there is something that is also noticeable with people who achieve that level where they influence the world for real. It's scalability. Now, we see it in business all the time, for instance. People can start a little company, and what they do will work because it's a small-scale business. And then they begin having success. And it turns out that when they try to grow, their business model and what they do cannot be scaled up. So they need to reinvent themselves and look at different production methods. For instance, let's say that you produce some kind of food item, and it's very artisan and all of that. And it's based on your grandma standing in the back, baking cookies with her secret recipe, right? And then the sales take off. And she has her secret way of doing things. That's not scalable, right? There will be a limit to how many cookies she can bake per day. It's that. Often when we do things, we do it in a way that can only work for as long as we are doing it ourselves, because it's our own little thing. For something to grow, it needs to have kind of scalability in it, that it needs to be able to grow. Other people need to be able to copy it, and it should work. So when you look at people who influence the world, it's because they trigger people's emotions, and they're able to then copy the thoughts, the attitudes, the ways, the actions, whatever it is, from that person. That is how things are kind of scaled up. When you look at your own life, should that be scaled up? That is also the thing, right? When we look at ourselves, are we scalable? Should we be? When we want to be an example in the world, one exercise I often give people is this. Imagine that 8 billion people did the exact same thing every moment, and they all followed you. How long before the world would collapse? Right? Because we often think, oh, well, it's just me, I can just do this. Most people think that way. So most of the things you do will not be scalable. They are a threat to everyone, right? But because it's just you, it kind of works. Right. people who influence the world, they have scalability as a way of thinking. They want people to copy them. They want to influence, which means that they kind of streamline themselves so that they may be copied and it will work. Right? So this is yet another thing when it comes to repetition and copying that we need to be aware of in ourselves. If we want to change the world in a positive way, we need to change and behave in such a way that every person on the planet could do it, and it would actually uplift the planet. When it comes to our thoughts, just that, right? Our intentions and attitudes, our mindset, should that be copied? If not, change it. When it comes to our emotions, are they balanced? Because what we need in the world today are more balanced feelings and emotions, right? Are you a representative of that, right? And basically, looking at human history, it's a collection of best practices. Best practice being the action, thoughts, and emotions and stories that most people have repeated for the longest time. That is human history. So it's looking at that in ourselves and say, are we representing best practices? And as spiritual students, we should definitely be the embodiment of best practices. And in most instances, you will not be. Right? And this is how we can look at ourselves and make some changes. We should always represent the best practices. What points forward?
So our great colleague here, Aki, he had another reflection that I also find extremely interesting, that if we think about like making productive, positive choices for ourselves first, we need kind of a bigger perspective on our own life, our own incarnation, our own set of incarnations. But to then make positive, productive decisions for an even bigger context than that, we need even more awareness, even more consciousness. But interestingly and ironically, the very few people that we might run into who seem to make really good, positive, productive decisions are often not interested in being leaders. They're not often interested in being visible or kind of, known or famous or that kind of thing. Why is it that so few of us who are capable of making good, positive decisions want to be visible and be more sort of public leaders?
It's back to what we just talked about. Once we figure out how to live a more balanced life, we lose ambition. It's just that. It's when we are deeply damaged that we want to be admired. Right? So then we get the ambition. I will show everyone how it's done so they can tell me that they're sorry. It's that, right? So it's always interesting to look at this because yes, often the best leaders don't want to be leaders. But what we've seen also when it comes to kind of small scale behavior is that because there are lots of studies done around this, when people behave in a way that is contributing to the well-being of other people, they have a tendency to inspire other people to do the same. So when someone is actively helping in the community, more people will join in. So leadership is not just about, becoming visible in a public way. It's working locally, kind of in your community and being that change. Back to scalability, right? When we make changes to ourselves so that we function better in our existing environment, our communities, that could be copied, right? That could be emulated. That can spread. That will inspire people. Often the thing is, the human ego is such that we have a tendency to create these grandiose ideas, right? It's the same thing with many people who come to me. It's always about being on stage with 10,000 people, being in the media. It's like being very important to everyone. And it's that. right? And it's not always that. For the most part, it's doing what we do in our daily lives in a better way. That's where it starts. Living those changes, figuring it out, and then inspire the people around us. Because when we live a more wholesome life spiritually, people will be touched by that, and we all know it. And that will spread. And then they may inspire other people. It will not necessarily point back to you, but you don't care. So there are many different forms of leadership, right? But to me, this is the most important way we can all change the world, because we all can. If we all do our little bit, right, together, it really matters. And this is why it's so important that we pull ourselves out of the indifference that we are collectively in right now, because we can all make a difference, right? And we should, every day. But we need to live a life that can inspire other people. It can be very small. It can still be impressive. It can still inspire.
From Germany, we have one of my favorite questions, which is, how do we help kids to remain authentic? And maybe more interestingly, how do we help them to not pile on all the layers of misunderstanding that they'll have to peel off as adults?
This is an interesting question, because we've had now a few decades where our part of the world has been experimenting with kids and try to let them figure it out on their own. They don't. It's not like if you hand a child a violin, if you wait for long enough, he will become a concert violinist, right? It doesn't happen. It may happen, but most likely not. The way to, if this kid has a talent, it still needs to know how to play the violin, how to do it right. He needs to learn how to read music. All of these things, he needs an education. So we do need to shape. And that's just how it is. As I said, like, freedom comes through discipline. And it's difficult for the human brain to accept this, because we don't want this to be true. As I say, in all arts, first there's strict discipline. When you look at the world of ballet, I'm a great fan of the Russian kind of school, because it's so disciplined. And it's extremely tough, and you will basically be brainwashed into or kind of reprogramming your brain and your body so you get the technique. And once you have the technique, then you will have your freedom, because then you know how to do it. Then you may express, because it's in you, it's part of you, right? The brain-body connection is complete. So you can begin express the more kind of subtle, refined, kind of like musicality of movement. That doesn't just happen. So this is why we have culture. We need to shape our kids for them to develop their talents. Because what we are as humans are basically raw material. Remember that our genetics are still mostly the same as they were several 100,000 years ago. We have not changed that much. Our culture has. So it's not like they will be more refined and wonderful and natural if we don't shape them. They will be more primitive. Sophistication does not happen naturally. And we need to learn how to apply ourselves to the world and to stretch and want greatness, right? So we've made the mistake, or the experiment, where we, in this part of the world, kind of giving kids too much freedom. And we need to learn, again, to shape them, but not to limit them. Because this is what we can do this time when discipline becomes more popular again, is to understand that it's not about fear, it's not about limitation. It is about bringing structure, right? Bringing the talents to a higher level. So this needs to be the intention, but it doesn't just happen. So I think today, what is also lacking in modern education, because we see it in the whole Western world, for instance, that kids are not learning about history anymore, because that's not important. They should just make things up, right? We need to understand context. Contextual thinking is extremely important, because it means that we're able to combine and connect different types of information and create these enormous tapestries of information. When we just learn to do little things here and there, and we don't have a greater context, the brain is not able to process it the same way. So make sure that kids learn history, evolution, science, art, and where it's coming from. So they get these long timelines of evolution of everything. The brain needs context in order to understand information. So when you look at highly intelligent people, people are also multi-intelligent, intelligent in different ways. This is the difference. They have an enormous contextual capacity. So they can see the math in art, and they can see the music in architecture because they are able to combine it, right? And when you train kids into doing this and to how to learn in a more contextual way, they're able to explore what they learn, and they're able to develop their intelligence in a much kind of broader way. And then they can find themselves in it. They can find their own pathways within those contexts. But again, discipline and facts, science is important, especially if you are on a spiritual path. I've talked about this extensively, that a lot of modern spirituality is kind of disconnected from science, disconnected from education. And it's not healthy, because it means that people are just feeling things. They're just making things up. All development of an individual has to be evidence-based, even though it's not necessarily evidence in a scientific way, because a lot of this is personal exploration, but we need to have methodology to be able to peel away our own bullshit, our own illusions, right? And we need to understand how to get to higher levels of insight and knowledge as well.
What is the difference between revolution and protest? Because if you see the American Revolution, French Revolution, Industrial Revolution, versus like the civil rights protests and gay rights protests, or what is the difference? Why does revolution seem to be change and future oriented, whereas protest is complaining? I don't know. There's something there.
Right. Now, those two things are often connected, but they're not the same people. When people protest, it's because they're in this state of negativity where they're just criticized, which means they have no idea. They just don't like, and they don't take responsibility. They don't understand the change. In that, there will be an opportunity, an opening, and people who are forward-looking, forward-thinking, they may use that and see, oh, right, we can actually create rapid change. Because it is, in a way, accelerated evolution. When a revolution happens, it's a rapid change. But there are then two groups. It's the protest group kind of paving the way, but that group has no intention, no idea. They just don't like. And that's it. And the other group will be dealing with ideas and being visionaries, but in the combination means that things can change rapidly. So we've seen this several times but they're always like two different groups. And they just come together. And if they come together, then revolution can happen. If they only have one of the two, if you only have the protest, if you only have the visionaries, nothing will happen.
We've got a question from the audience.
Yeah, referencing actually the two previous questions here about raising our consciousness and hitting that snag of passivity that we do when we come into that state. We're working to go beyond our pain and to create something out of intention beyond our pain, and then we hit that snag. And then I was thinking, sometimes we are able to create from that state. We can actually apply ourselves, but upscaling, creating something even greater, is a whole different level. And what you said previously is then we have to raise our consciousness even more. So is that what I'm hearing? Is that the clue here?
Yes. Now, this brings me into the God complex, because many people who've ended up changing the world, they've had a God complex, which means that they believe they're chosen. They have an enormous ego. Like, you have a person like George Soros, for instance. He is like one of the few who have actually talked about this. He is, for those of you who don't know him, he is one of the most kind of famous or infamous investors in the world, and he's been part of creating a lot of instability around the world, and has been influencing governments and, had his hand in a lot of things. Now, he said that when he was a child, he had the very strong sense that he was a god, and that he was here to change this planet, change human history. And that he still has that. And he sees his actions as actions of a god. So he sees that he has the right to do what he does, just like, historical gods. Now, this is not uncommon. Back to you having thoughts and feelings that I'm supposed to do something great, right? I'm chosen for something, I just don't know what. It's that. But many people who end up doing great things, they have this God complex. They can feel they're chosen, that there is something they're supposed to do, but they sometimes have it a lot stronger than normal people. Because we can all feel that we're very special, but these people feel that they're special beyond that. So, right, it takes over their brain. But very few people talk about it. But I know from having met a lot of them that they think this way. So this is quite common. I think it's wonderful that Soros has talked about it. He's been criticized for it. He's a maniac. But no, all people think that this way. He just took the consequence of that thought and has lived his life trying to be a god. So, back to scalability. This is part of why some people really go for it, because they feel that they have this divine kind of mantle, they have this mission, this greatness in them, and this is what they're supposed to do. We can basically boil this down to genetics if we want to, because this is just the attempt of becoming dominant, right? The fantasy of everyone is to become the kind of the blueprint of what a human should be and be able to influence everything, because this is evolution, right? Just trying out different strategies. And whenever we feel I'm better than everyone else, we are all supposed to think that way, but then we're supposed to go out there and fight and kill so that our genes will become dominant. So In the old days, a person like George Soros would probably be a warrior. He would be like Alexander the Great, right? Now it's with money. It's still the same mindset. Because when you look at these conquerors in the past, yeah, they had a God complex, right? This is also why they would often crown themselves as gods. When you look at Egypt, when you look at Rome, they were gods. Because that's our ego, right? But when we feel that, it can give us the incentive. And this is how we're tricked, because we get the brain chemistry, saying, I'm greater, I have to do this. And that will become more important than staying at home eating figs, right? Because we could do that too. The challenge today is that we have so much stimulation. We're overstimulated, right? Because everything in the world is trying to give us the brain chemistry that we want. That can become stronger than the God complex that we all have, that I'm supposed to do something great. And now we can have that thought, but then there's a movie on Netflix, and we just bought a bag of candy, so that's important too, I guess. Or it's that, right? So we're overstimulated, which means that it's difficult for those signals to get through the fog, because we're so satisfied all the time and anxious and depressed, because we're satisfied, but we don't have purpose. And our genes do not understand it. Because what we're feeling, the level of satisfaction, should come from having won a war, having been crowned a god, and then we have done nothing. And yet we have more brain chemicals than they did. So we're not equipped to deal with this, so we all get completely fucked up, right? So we get anxious because this chemistry should come from and then we haven't done anything, and then we're like, what are we doing with our life? So we all feel, I should do something, but then we take medications instead, right? It's very strange, but our genetics are not designed for this. So it's difficult to deal with. So the God complex is actually healthy. It's nature testing out who can win, who can be dominant. Because why should anyone want to climb the highest mountain simply because it's there? Or to go out and kill all enemies simply because they exist? It's a lot of work, right? It's so much work. And you will not do it unless you think you're a god or that you're chosen. So that's where it's coming from. It's how the ego interprets spiritual greatness. So with less of everything, that God complex will actually get stronger in us. And maybe to the level where we will do something about it. Because it's also the divine inspiration, right, interpreted through the ego. So we're supposed to seek greatness, achieve great things for real because we can. And we just know it because we're better than anyone else. And remember, you all are. You're better at being you than anyone else. You're better at your flow and your uniqueness than anyone else. And that is what it is about. So we're all better than anyone else. We're all gods. And yet, we're overstimulated taking medication and watching Netflix. Right? It's, from an evolutionary standpoint, evolution goes, what the fuck is going on? Where's the competition? On social media. That's where we battle it out. And then we write, feisty messages, and we change nothing. But it feels like we are. Right? So again, we are in a very strange place where we're not really achieving anything. So fewer and fewer people are actually changing the world. We've outsourced that to corporations. And they have no other intention than making money, and we're happy with it. So we all get depressed and sick, and we just let the world spiral downwards. And as spiritual students, we should at least be able to snap out of this, right? And reconnect to who we are and our purpose in the world. if nothing else, let the God complex take over your ego so at least you do something. Because then you will believe in yourself. Even if it's the ego, it's better than nothing, right? If you believe that I'm better than anyone and I'm going to show them, at least you will try. You will bring something, right? You want to do something, not just for attention, but because you have it in you. That is better. So do not be afraid of your ego. It's your best tool. And I don't care how big and inflamed your ego is, as long as it brings you out of indifference and the passive state, because that is a lot worse. Then you're wasting everything. You are completely unique. Everything about you is basically spiritual essence in a carrier vehicle, which is your body. And you're doing nothing with it. We need to want to change the world. And again, the thing with spiritual traditions and religions, having thought, well, we shouldn't, we should be nothing. Sure, when you've reached that level, where you already tested out your God complex, when you already explored your ego, but not when we're numb from medication and candy. Right? Then we need to get back on believing in ourselves and that we can change the world. So wanting that, I don't care what it is. But you need to start believing in yourself, and you need to start feeling that you have purpose, because you do. Inside of you, you know. You've chosen a body with a certain DNA, a certain genetics, because that is the physical embodiment of your essence. It's all there. When you listen to it, and when you want to achieve greatness, and that becomes more important to you, your flow will come, your passion will come. Most people today, all they can feel is stuff. They relate to all their reactions and how they're triggered and if they have their needs met and all of that. This is where, and emotional stuff and all of that. Relationships. So our whole chemistry and emotions are just there. Very few people have active thoughts of greatness. Even when you go back 100, 150 years ago, it was natural for people to have these thoughts. Right? Just like, for instance, a young boy would want to, go on a sailing ship, explore the world, become someone. Most had it in them. They could feel it because they were not oversaturated with their own chemicals. We're fucking ourselves up and we're becoming more and more passive. So that is what we need to kind of reverse and free ourselves from. And there are many things you can do in a practical way. I'll get back to that, but do we have any questions first?
I don't see any. Do we have any more questions in the audience?
Okay, good.
Because
No.
I just wanted to bring up one more thing, and maybe it'll tie into your conclusion here, is could you speak to David Attenborough? Arguably the most unique human being in human history, having seen more of the planet than anyone else.
Well, yes, I often call him the only educated man on the planet. And the reason is that he, as an individual, has seen more of this planet than any other human in history. He's very much underrated. When we understand that what he has seen, how many life forms he has seen and interacted with, right? He's been all over the world, being intimate with nature, learning how this planet works. He's been able then to build a contextual understanding of life on this planet and place the human life form into the context of what this planet is, right? That in itself creates insight and wisdom that no other human has ever had before. So from that perspective, I see him as the only educated human ever, because all others are educated in whatever humans have made up. right? He's educated in this planet and he's seen it. He's experienced it now for decades. And this is also an individual that, you know, he invented nature shows on TV. He kind of like, he started that whole thing. So he's also influenced how humans connect with nature, although it's through a screen. So then still, and he's able to make people feel. So he's been very influential in that way. But it's a good point because there are so many ways to influence the world and to change the world. And he's shown his love and respect for nature. He's also understood that people simply don't get it, right? They don't understand because they don't see what he sees. And that's often their frustration. We all get, once we reach a certain consciousness and we get it and we understand things, and we also at the same point understand that no one else will get this. And then the job is, how can I work with this in such a way that I can transfer it, right? And this is also what he is doing, what he's been trying to do, is to inspire people to get closer to nature, to love nature and understand it also from nature's perspective, not just ours. Now, when it comes to changing the world, it's where to start. So we don't start with these great ideas and then we do nothing because we can't, right? It's also how the ego will trick us, because we can create a big idea and we don't know how to do it. So it's like, if it wasn't for this, then I totally would have, right? Everyone's with this thing. It's the same thing when people come up with, you know, they wanted to be a movie star, but something happened, and of course, you know, this happened, so they couldn't, because if not, they would be the most famous person ever. It's all bullshit, but humans make up those types of stories. So in order to understand how to change the world in a productive and concrete way, make notes. Now, a very simple exercise is this. Recognize what you don't like in the world, and then do the opposite. This is a simple one, but you will find it more difficult than you think. For instance, if you don't like people who lie, then make a commitment to always speak the truth. Right? Very simple. If you don't like people who are selfish and cheap, then be generous. But make a commitment so that you, in all your choices and decisions, that you represent generosity. If you don't like superficial people, well, decide to always be knowledgeable and a person of substance. And then behave accordingly, right? If you don't like people of weak ethics and values, then decide and make a commitment to live a life demonstrating ethics and values. And if you think that there is too much negativity and hate in the world, then make a commitment to be loving and compassionate. And it's also in other areas, if you think that the civilization is using too many resources, well then, use less resources. It's very simple. Once you recognize that there's something you don't like in the world or about someone, you only have credibility if you do the opposite. But often we don't. That's why we criticize, right? But we can use this, because when we criticize, we do recognize that I don't like this. And that's a good start. But then you have to do it. So make a commitment to do the opposite. It's a very simple way of understanding how we can change the world. Because we all dislike things. We all dislike people. But the moment we can pinpoint what we're criticizing, then make a commitment to do the opposite, and then practice. This is a way to influence the world in a good way, because then you are demonstrating the change. Another thing, like I've looked at different studies. on how to, like, what are the common denominators among people throughout history who have changed the world. And a lot of the things we've been talking about today. One thing is back to being genuine and authentic. It's back to being original. They've all had this quality. And then you don't care too much about what other people think about you, right? You just do your thing. And you think that your way works better. And then you apply the God complex because, again, we need to start with the God complex because otherwise, think of also that, as we talked about, once the ego is satisfied, we stop, right? The God complex can ensure the horizontal consciousness in the biological life form, which is the human, to continue. Right? So even though your needs are met, you continue because now it's about you deserving greatness because you're better. Right? This is why we need that ego. So, one other thing that is typical, we've talked about this, they do not criticize others. If they want change, they make them happen. For instance, the typical thing when you look at leaders who have influenced the world, modern HR would probably not be very pleased because they don't give people necessarily a second chance. They do not criticize people who work for them. They fire them or kill them. It's basically being dedicated to the vision and to what they want to do, and they will stop at nothing. Right? It's that. So they will not negotiate. They don't doubt themselves. Which one can also say lack of self-reflection. Sure, back to the God complex. Right? But it's believing that you can do the impossible, which has always been part of what drives people. It's really interesting because when you see the kind of memoirs of a lot of people throughout history who've done great things, they have always believed in the impossible. The more people tell them it can't be done, the more they say, oh, I can do it. It's simply because I did not exist before now, so it hasn't been done. It's that. One thing we can also do, because this is also how we can all make little changes. One thing that one has noticed in studies, smile more. It's the simplest thing we can do that can change the world. Right? And even some of you will find that difficult. Right? It's like, it's almost nothing. Learn to smile more. Right? When you smile to yourself, many of you heard this, but when we use the kind of smiling muscles in our face, it will change our brain chemistry. Even when we don't mean it, because the brain will respond just by the muscles moving. So if you make a fake smile, you will still get happier. So learn to smile and smile at other people as much as you possibly can. People receiving a smile, today, people don't expect it. We have come to a point in our human history where people expect everyone to be negative and to attack them because this is the reality on social media. So we believe that this is what people are like now. They're all enemies. So by smiling, people don't expect this. So many people have said this is also in surveys, like when people smile at them for no reason, it can make their whole day. Right? So that as a practice, actively smiling at people, even to your partner. It's been found that humans today smile less than we used to. Right? And also think that when we smile, it does something to our brain chemistry. When we are smiling less, it means we're changing our brain chemistry into becoming more negative. This is the simplest spiritual practice you could possibly do. So please practice your smile every day. Smile at people. Be aware of how it can influence the world around you, including yourself. An extension of that is give compliments. People who are good at influencing their community, they're really good at giving compliments. And part of that is what we're going to see with people who are influencing the world in positive ways. They want others to have success. They use what they have, they use what they've learned, and they pass it on. Back to what we talked about, the true spiritual expansion comes from bringing growth and expansion in the world around you. When you do this, you're practicing this principle. And it's seen that people who are able to influence the world in a positive way around them, I'm not talking about like standing on a stage, it's like how we work in our communities, because that's where we start. It's this, wanting other people to have success, wanting to uplift and wanting to see them do better, giving compliments, supporting, being there for other people, right? It's that. In the old days, people would actively be there for each other because they needed to in order to survive. We're not doing that anymore, just like we've stopped smiling, right? Try to be there for other people. And also celebrate other people's successes. We have a tendency, as we talked about, to celebrate people's failures and misery. That's when we support. That's when we come together. It's insane, right? So we all go where we get rewards. So today we get social rewards by being the bigger victim, by going through difficult stuff. Successes, we get criticism, right? Try to break that pattern in yourself. Support other people's successes. Tell them that they're doing a great job and that you want to see more of that. You know, inspire people. Because I'm sure many of you can relate to, like when we do something great, we are afraid of the criticism, right? It's insane. We have to stop that. It's not how we build a better world. So at least do it yourself. Try to notice other people's efforts, right? And compliment and support. Okay, and yet now the thing that one can do based on surveys, random acts of kindness, right? Simply being a nice person. Do things for other people when you have the opportunity. It's just that. It's very simple, but it does something to you and the other person. We need to start believing in the good in the world. But look around you, people, normal people, they don't have a lot of reasons. We need to give it to them, right? So do random acts of kindness. Be a kind and generous individual. It's not difficult, but it's not part of our culture anymore, right? So we have to practice. We have to remind ourselves. So try to include that in your vocabulary of actions. Now, what also marks people who are influencing the world is that they always educate themselves. They always learn. They always see that they want to do something new. They're able to take criticism as interesting input. They always want to learn. They always want to improve. You see that with a lot of people who also achieve success. They always want to learn. They never stop. And also one very practical thing that has come up many times is it comes to like practical things that we can do. Give blood. If we want very concrete things we can do, right? There's a shortage of blood. If you don't know how to contribute in any other way, that's a thing you can do. Like the thing is, when we do good things for the world, it feels better and we start believing in ourselves. It does not always have to be these big things, but look at practical things. It's the same things like we can become an organ donor. We can, when adopting an animal, right? Adopt a rescue animal. That makes a difference, right? It's like these little things, but it's always back to the intention and the decisions we make. These are all small things, but it shows a mindset and an attitude and a consciousness of heart. And it's also, buy planet-friendly and people-friendly products, right? It takes a little bit more research. But remember that whenever you buy something, you are encouraging a company to do more of what they're doing. It's that simple. So wherever you spend your money, you're saying, keep going, do exactly what you're doing. So you can, through your decisions, in your little way, also, therefore, be part of making changes. And also one thing that is very clear when you look at all the studies is contribute to your local community, which is volunteering, it could be politics, this or that, but try to be someone in your local community, right? There are always things that needs to get done. Always, but people are numb and passive, right? Why shouldn't you be in the forefront of when you see something important, right? You can be an activist. You can do things. It's not always the big things, but living a life, in your community, with the people who are already impacting, and that you try to be someone who could influence them in a positive way so that can spread. As I said, there are studies showing that when someone helps, when someone is going beyond self-interest, other people will do it too. We're all waiting for someone to start. And I think when we're on a spiritual path, we should always be the one who starts. Because we should be aware. We should be in a state of purpose. I have so many notes here today, but we'll see what's relevant. Now, when it comes to you becoming a person that changes the world, understand that that's what you're here to do. As I said, you are changing the world, but not necessarily in a good way. And you can change that. The world needs you. As that we've come to a point in human history where we need people who want to do good. So what does it take for you to actively go out there and make a difference? Do not let yourself be numbed or desensitized. Do the opposite, right? Try to be the change. You have it all in you. When you listen to yourself, when you connect, you know what to do. You know your values. You know how you can live and practice from a higher perspective and higher consciousness. But far too often we choose not to. Just for today because I deserve it, right? And then there's tomorrow where we do exactly the same, right? It doesn't just happen. We have to choose it. We have to remind ourselves, and we have to work together. And hopefully, today this can inspire you a little bit to also, work with friends and family, have talks, discussions about how we can be better, how we can influence the world, how we can change the world in a positive way, not by criticizing, not by protesting, but by doing something. Every person who has influenced the world for real has offered a solution to a problem. It's never been about protesting. Protesters have never changed anything. We need to offer solutions. It's that. Be the solution. Meaning that look at yourself, look at your practices, look at your attitudes, what you communicate, how you behave, your choices, all of that to see how can you make better versions of that. How can you show the solutions? We need to demonstrate as spiritual people what it would be like if the planet had a higher consciousness. Because it's us. It's you. And we have that responsibility and we have that opportunity. Nothing is stopping you from demonstrating a higher consciousness. Nothing. The world is begging for it. People are screaming for it. And you will start by demonstrating it in yourself, in your own life, in your own community. But please talk with others about this. Changing the world is not done for most people by doing these enormous great things and becoming famous. It's how we influence each other's. It's each other, how we hold each other accountable. How we practice every day to do better and be better and make better choices and set the example that will pull this planet forward, that will lift the consciousness, that can bring healing and love. But we have to demonstrate it. So start with yourself. Start with your life. And as I said, when you recognize, I don't like this, do the opposite. Become someone that people relate to. Become someone that people see, because once you are cohesively positive, once you cohesively demonstrate a better version of what a human should be at this point, others will be inspired by you and they will start to copy you as a start, and then they may, make it their own thing over time. And this is how we change the world. So you don't have to buy a blonde wig or a microphone. Do the opposite. Peel away everything that is not you authentically and connect, lift your consciousness, and then go out there and demonstrate what it means to be a person in spiritual awakening.
Thank you so much, IKYA, and thank you all for joining us tonight for IKYA Live, world news from the spiritual perspective, and really, truly, your premier news program for bringing practical spiritual advice for your everyday life. And tonight, wow. So take it with you, and one simple thing you can do is to share tonight's episode, because the recipe is here, how to become someone who positively influences the world around you, and others could be inspired by it. So please share tonight's episode, subscribe to our YouTube channel and to all of our social media, ikya.official. Join us next Monday at 19 o'clock Oslo time for IKYA Live again. And drop the wig and the microphone, but find your uniqueness and bring it out into the world. We can't wait to see you again next time for IKYA Live.